Hello, I'm Andrew Ranson. I'm director of the Wes Watkins Center for International Trade Development here at Oklahoma State University. And today I have the great pleasure of visiting with Everett Eissenstat. Everett, we're really glad you're here. It's homecoming weekend here at Oklahoma State, and we're excited to be hosting you. You're going to be speaking this evening as part of our global briefing series that OSU Global puts on. And you're going to be speaking about navigating global risks. But first, I just want to have a little bit more of a personal conversation and talk a little bit about your background. I know that you've had a career that has spanned law and business and policy, and you've also been involved at both the legislative and the executive branch levels, at the highest levels, negotiating trade policy, which includes forming the policy, negotiating it internationally, and then seeing it implemented and walking through that process both legislatively and through your time at the USTR and in the President's office. So I guess my first question is, as you kind of look back on your career so far, how much of it would you say has been sort of by design, like you had sort of a target and you did things specifically to prepare, versus things unfolded and you responded?
Well, Andrew, thank you so much. That was a very kind introduction. I'm really honored to be here and to be on the OSU campus again. I've got great memories of the school and the university and everything it's done for me to be able to move off in my career. So this is a great opportunity to be with you and the students today. So thank you for that. I think it was actually a little of both, actually. And I remember distinctly reading a book, and I probably got it from the library here, called International Careers, about how to get an international career. And it was very interesting. I still recall the best advice that book had was that, you know, a career is not a destination, it's a journey. And I remember the analogy they provided was like a sailboat. You know, you've got a direction you want to go, but your path to get there might not be as direct as you think. And I always kept that in mind, and it evolved over time. I never knew I would be able to do the things I've been able to do and have those opportunities. They just built on each other. But I always had kind of a general direction, and that was I wanted to work in an international policy. What that entailed, it could have been anything. It could have been health. It could have been, science. I wasn't good at either of those, so unlikely, but certainly could have been. But I ended up working in law and policy and trade and government, and none of that was actually preordained. It was just a series of steps. But I think the important thing, and what I'd suggest for people thinking about how to manage their careers, is to, you know, conceptualize the kind of person they want to be, or somebody they know, or someone they admire, and look at their skill set and think, well, okay, well, how do I get from here to there? What skill set do they have that I don't have, and how can I acquire those skills? You're not going to become that person. You may not even have the career that person has, which is great because it's everybody's own unique opportunity. But you'll get there, and you'll build something pretty cool. So I think it was actually Ruth Gator's Supreme Court Justice Ginsburg that said that. It said she really, you know, how'd she get to where she wanted to be? And she thought about who she admired, and next thing you know, she moved on to that place. So that's kind of what those two foundational elements. One, no direct path, and two, have a general destination, but it doesn't have to be a specific outcome.
Okay, I love that. That sort of find somebody you admire, kind of understand what components of their skill sets and things were part of their path. So that combines sort of a skills base, knowledge base, and a relationship base.
Yeah.
I mean, in a way, you're building a relationship with that person you admire. It might be somebody who's a professor or some mentor who you're actually working with, or it could be somebody that you read about or just know about.
Yeah.
But can you talk about?
Sure.
Well,
I mean, for me, it was Cordell Hull.
Okay.
You know, I noticed what he had done, you know, after the World War II, and how he had worked and really had a vision of how he thought the global architecture should evolve. And, you know, he did it. His impact was huge. Now, I'm not Cordell Hull, I never will be, but I just really admired what he did, and so that got me to, you know, one step further, and that's, you know, one reason I ended up going to Washington.
Okay.
So
the other aspect I was interested in, is along the way the relationships, because I know that careers are often that combination of the skills that you build and the reputation you build, but also the people that you meet along the way.
Absolutely.
Who then let you know about opportunities or maybe drag you in or bring you into
You are
opportunities.
so right, Andrew. That is such a great point. And in fact, it's not easy to really establish yourself in an international pathway. You got to have credibility. And interest is great, but it's not enough. And so it was people that helped me along the way. And I'll just tell a quick story about moving to Washington. I didn't have a job, and I just thought that was where people did international work. So I moved there with my wife, and I just networked, and I couldn't get anybody to hire me. But I eventually, I met some people on Capitol Hill. They referred me to somebody over at the USTR's office. They happened to have an internship, unpaid, and I took it. And I worked there for many months unpaid. It was under Bill Clinton, and worked on Brazil issues. But that evolved to the career I actually, because I had accepted that and had those relationships, and the people at USTR knew me. The young lady who ran Congressional Affairs knew I was looking for work. She knew Jim Colby, who was a member of Congress, and said, "You want me to fax over your resume?" And I was like, "Oh, dream come true. Of course I want that."
Right.
And she did, and he gave me that opportunity, and that just changed everything.
Yeah.
So it really was people that opened the doors. And letting people help you is really a valuable thing to do.
Yeah. While you also perform, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
you got
it's
to. You
kind
got
of
to.
that.
Yeah, it's a give and take, right? I mean,
Right.
people want to promote you, but you have to be promotable.
Right.
You have to be somebody they admire and I don't know about admire and respect. I don't know about that, but you need to be somebody that they have confidence in, because they're putting their credibility on the line by introducing you to somebody they know and say, "Hey, I think this
Exactly.
person's going to be good," and they wouldn't do that if they didn't have confidence in your ability to do the work.
That's right, because
Yeah.
they're putting their relational
Absolutely.
equity
Yeah.
out there, and it's then your job to either pay back on that equity or hurt them in some way if you don't
Yeah.
pull through.
Yeah.
So we've touched on, I think, this question a little bit, but I'll ask it directly. What advice would you give those who are in our program, in the Global Studies program, studying
Sure.
things like trade and policy and these sorts of things? What advice would you give them as they are starting their careers? And then we'll get in a little bit more to the context of the global environment later, but
Yeah,
more
well, a couple of
general.
things. One, I do think having grasp or at least proficiency in a foreign language is really important. And there's a lot of ways to do that. I know people are very intimidated by, particularly Americans. They're like, "Well, I'll never be able to speak a language," but you can, and you will. And if you want to do international work, it's a great asset.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of programs now. There's intensive summer programs, both in the United States and abroad. 3 years, not 3 years, excuse me, 3 weeks of your life, right? To really immerse yourself and gain that proficiency can make a huge difference. And then, demonstrated interest, volunteering, interning, joining the clubs, traveling abroad. I've always, when I look at someone's resume, if they say, "Well, I want to do international work," and I look at it, and they may have a great academic background, but if I don't see a demonstrated interest, like it's a personal passion, I'm probably not that interested. And the other thing I'd say that I find incredibly valuable is hard skills. It doesn't mean you have to be a lawyer or a scientist or a health professional. You better be able to write, and write really, really well. If you can write well and speak well, you will do very well. So I think one of the great things, and again for me, it was it was a journey, not a destination. One of the reasons I was able to develop my writing skills was because I had a great mentor when I was in my master's program who really said, look at this, think about it, think about what you're trying to communicate. How do you break it down? You're performing a service for somebody. They need to be able to understand you. It's got to be clear, and it's valuable. So being able to write clearly and speak clearly is really, really important. So I think the writing skills are very critical.
Yeah, and those two sides of communication. To communicate, you have to express it, but it also has to be received. And so if you're not able to express something in a way that it can actually be digested, that can be an impediment.
Which is a great point, Andrew, because it's not just speaking, it's listening.
Yes.
and hearing what the person's saying and try to understand what we're actually trying to get at. And one of the things as a negotiator I found really to be the most helpful is being able to hear the person, and they have their talking points, they have their position, but sometimes you can kind of pick up a little bit about what's really the issue, and seeing things from their point of view is your benefit. So being able to listen and understand and empathize and put yourself in the other person's position is doing international relations, I think, is a really important skill.
Oh, that's powerful. So almost, I mean, it's listening to the point that you can almost understand what's behind their talking
Absolutely.
points, why those are the ones they're bringing,
Yeah.
because there's some other thing they're either trying to accomplish or trying to avoid, and
Absolutely.
understanding that, sometimes without having them have to say it.
Exactly, and if you've done your homework, and one of the great things about an interdisciplinary program like what you're doing here is that you understand that you do your homework, you know their political situation, you know their economic situation, you know their priorities, you know they have sensitivities in agriculture, they're trying to promote digital trade. That homework matters, and understanding your counterpart is really important and incredibly beneficial if you're going to get what you want, which is a
Right.
positive outcome
Right.
for both of you. It's got to be a win-win at the end of the day.
Right. So we're starting to head that direction. Let's spend the last few minutes just talking about the current global context. I mean, we were just walking down the hall and saw
Yeah.
some of the news items, and there's no shortage of pretty difficult things going on around the world. I guess the question I'd like to ask is, throughout your career in this field, it seems like there's been some ebbs and flows, and I would guess that during the earlier parts of your career, it seems like the global partnerships were moving towards more homogeneity or more
Yeah.
harmonization, more cooperation, lowering of trade barriers, those sorts of things. And then I think today it seems to be more characterized by fragmentation, maybe regionalism or things like this. And so can you just talk a little bit about maybe what are the top 2 or 3 issues
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
things that people should be focusing on that are going to be most important over the coming
Well,
years?
I could tell you, and you could take, but they'll change.
Sure.
The top 2 or 3 things today may not be next week. I mean, we see this horrible conflict in the Middle East, and that was unexpected, and now it's going to be a very dominant factor for anybody operating international, and much less the human, tragedy resulting from it. So I think that, but there are some mega trends, and one, there's a real movement against faith in international institutions. So there's like this populist undercurrent that's articulating itself, not just in the United States, but around the world. You see it in Latin America, you can see it in Asia. And I think the reason that is happening is because people become disenfranchised, and governments aren't providing or doing what they say they're going to do or doing it well, or they feel disconnected from government. And so somebody comes along and says, I understand you. They don't understand you. I understand you. I know how we can do this. This is what we need to do. It's their fault. We're going to do this. Yeah, and it becomes a kind of a cultural mix of, it's not you, it's them. And then people get validated for feeling certain ways. It just builds on itself. And so it's a really important dynamic that is unhealthy. But I'm afraid it's going to be around for a while. Secondly, is the economic rise of China,
Yes.
which has had an enormous impact. When we did the permanent normal trade relations for China, it was a very different dynamic. And it's hard to believe, but people were, U.S. government officials were encouraging U.S. companies to go to China.
Right.
And the idea, and this goes back a little bit to the populism, the idea was, we will bring values, we will help them build, they will see the benefits of democracy, rule of law, and transparency, accountability, and they will be more like us. And they did adopt some of it, but they have their own methodology as well. And it's very different, very state driven. And so, but their economic rise and now their political cloud in the world is very, very different than what it was. And that's created a lot of tensions, and then you overlay that, and this would be the third piece I'd put on the table, is technology. rapid dissemination of information, AI, so much technology is now about national security that a lot of what companies do isn't just about selling T-shirts, although that's important, but you get into things like semiconductors or drones. I mean, and you're talking some very sensitive things. So an environment of homogeneity that you talked about doesn't really work for drones if you have a concern with that technology going into a country that you may view as an adversary. And so you put restrictions on it. And that bill, government will say, we don't want you selling there, we don't want you investing there. That's going to stay around for a while. So I'd call that, a rise in what government desire for more economic security over economic efficiency. And it's a major theme. So I'd put those three things on the table to start.
Okay, let me ask one follow-up, because I think we could probably talk for maybe several hours about each of those. But I want to just follow up on the China component, because that's my background is in Chinese studies, and I speak Mandarin, spent quite a bit of time over there. And so what I heard in a recent conference, the observation that not only was China's accession to the WTO in 2001 a significant moment, but really the financial crisis of 2008
Absolutely.
was maybe the more significant moment, because at that point the shift in mindset where the Chinese government, but also much of the population, looked at the Western economic model just sort of writ large and said, maybe it's not so great, and then we're able to create a narrative around that and really move away from some of the reforms that maybe weren't happening as fast as anyone hoped, but were happening to some degree. Yeah. And then because of that, the belief that increased economic prosperity would lead to increased political openness and so forth, that assumption that was driving a lot of the cooperation started to fail.
Well, I'd say yes, and partially yes. I'd say yes to the proposition that the 2008 crisis delegitimized the neoliberal economic mindset, and that China saw that. In fact, China played a very significant role in stabilizing the world economy after 2008, and they know that. We know that, and it's good. That being said, I think that had a couple of components to it. One, it validated the old state-owned driven model, that yes, you do need some constraints. You can't just have business operating without some constraints. But the other piece of it is that they felt really empowered to promote their model abroad as an alternative. And you can see that today. In fact, we could talk, there's some really interesting fact patterns just this year that are accelerating. You look at the fact that the G20, which was one of these sacrosanct geoeconomic or political institutions. Everybody, if you remember the G20, it was great. You always showed up. Well, Xi didn't show up. President Xi didn't even go. Where did he go? He went to the BRICS conference because he wants to serve as an alternative. And so you can literally go down and see that China has really tried and succeeded in some way of creating an alternative world order in their vision. But the other piece of that is, and we'll see how this evolves, which is why I don't completely agree that their current practices are based just on the 2008. I think that their concern for their own ability to maintain control within their country is very deep.
Yes, and that hasn't changed.
That hasn't changed, and they can't admit mistakes.
Right.
And the pandemic was brutal, and did they handle it well? We don't know. Will the pandemic be China's 2008 financial crisis? We don't know. It's too early to tell. But those kind of international, seemingly intangibles, they're real. They have real impact, and that's why, again, the kind of interdisciplinary program that helps people see around corners and put the pieces of the puzzle together is really valuable in this day and age. So kudos to you and the school for everything you're doing to continue to promote that. It's certainly important and much needed in today's world.
Well, Everett, thank you so much for being here. We're super honored and excited to have you here, and thank you for taking
Yeah.
some time to visit with us.
It's a
And,
pleasure, Andrew, and it's great to speak with you today, and hopefully it'll be the first of many. I know we'll have other conversations, so I
You
look
bet.
forward to those as well. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
You bet.